This video is going to cover the second last operation strategy, which is about overcoming resistance to change. The reality is that in businesses, and particularly within operations, there is going to be the need for change. Sometimes that change might require staff to lose their jobs, i.e. through redundancy. But the bottom line is that as an operations manager, the manager needs to try to put in place strategies or be aware of the fact that change does bring about resistance, and they need to try to manage that resistance effectively. So as it says, the change might be needed because of internal or external influences. So the government, for example, might make a decision, i.e. external influence, that requires the business to make a change. Or there might be internal pressures, cost cutting, for example, and therefore the business needs to make change. The role of an operations manager in that instance is to overcome the resistance to that particular change, which can be hard because it might mean telling 10 people they're going to lose their job. So how do you overcome that resistance to change? Clearly, the first thing that comes to mind is we'll give them a nice payout, a nice redundancy payment, but that's not always possible either. So generally, resistance to change arises because of two areas, either financial reasons or psychological, and the financial ones are probably the key ones. Things like the purchase of new equipment, that's going to bring about some change. People are going to need retraining, redundancy payments. Some people might want a redundancy, but some people, that's the worst thing that they could possibly think of. Retraining and also reorganising the plant. Okay, so in terms of the financial costs and resistance to change, there's many costs that might come about, and the cost of new equipment is the first one. So in terms of purchasing new equipment, there's often resistance because of at the business level, because of the high financial cost of purchasing that equipment, and the manager is going to resist that change because, hang on a second, I don't want to spend $1 million on a new piece of equipment. That $1 million is going to come straight out of our bottom line for this year, and we hadn't budgeted for it, or it's going to have too significant impact on our profitability, and we or I are resisting the need to purchase that new equipment. The operations manager there needs to consider all costs associated with purchasing that equipment, because there's also training costs as well, potentially, and maybe redundancy costs as well. So in terms of how do you overcome that resistance, well, the operations manager needs to think about, okay, what are the benefits to the business? Yes, it's going to hurt us in the short term. Okay, we're going to have to pay $1 million to buy this new piece of equipment, but in 12 months' time, 2 years, 5 years, the business is going to be better off, and it's going to be better off by X. It's going to be better off by X number of dollars, X percent. Our productivity is going to improve. All those things need to be considered. That's the things I've just been talking about there. So in terms of redundancy payment, that's another reason for resistance to change. Redundancy is when people lose their job and they do receive some sort of payout from the organisation, as it says there. Now, the resistance is, again, that there's going to be a significant cost to that redundancy, but the manager needs to see, okay, well, what's the benefit to the organisation of making these redundancy payouts? There's the resistance to it, but what's the benefit? The benefit is that we're going to have less workers, so it's going to cost us less in terms of wages next year, the year after that. And also we're going to have a more effective organisation. Potentially we're going to have more motivated staff because they realise, hang on, I didn't get made redundant. I've been kept by the organisation, therefore I must be valued. So therefore I'm not going to resist that change as much as maybe others might. This can be an issue though. If long-serving employees are made redundant, that can lead to a significant cost, and B, some sort of loss of culture. Retraining is another resistance to change that might occur. Staff are told, we're bringing this new piece of equipment and you need to be retrained, and you need to go and spend a month training to use this new piece of equipment. And that resistance can occur from the organisation and from the staff. From the organisation, hang on, we don't want to incur the time spent for that person to go away for a month to train themselves to use this particular piece of equipment, and the cost involved in sending them to train to use that piece of equipment. And then the resistance can also come from the worker themselves. I don't want to retrain to use this piece of equipment. I like the equipment I'm using at the moment. I've been using it for 10 years. I come to work, I don't really have to think. I just use it, and it's done. I don't want to be challenged. I just want to do my job. And there's that resistance. So it's up to the manager to try to sell that to that worker. These are the benefits to you. It's going to improve your hiring ability from another organisation. It might allow you to get a promotion with the organisation. In some way, the manager needs to try to sell that to that worker. Okay, the last resistance to change from a financial perspective is reorganising the plant layout. So sometimes the plant layout needs to be reorganised to make it more efficient, move things around on the factory floor, for example, or move things around in an office, change how things are done. And again, you're going to get resistance from the worker and from the organisation itself. For the organisation, there's a cost involved. You have to pay money to have this plant reorganised. There's a resistance there. But the operations manager needs to look at it and say, okay, this is going to make us more efficient. It's going to reduce our costs. It's going to improve our profitability. Therefore, it's beneficial to us. From a worker's perspective, it's the same as retraining. I don't want the plant layout to change. I've been working the same seat or the same desk or the same part of the factory floor for 3 years, and I like it, and I don't want it to be changed. Then it needs to be sold. It needs to be validated to that worker what's the benefit, so that they don't resist that change and they overcome that resistance to change. The last resistance is known as inertia. Inertia is effectively a fear of change or a fear of the unknown, and that's the role really of management generally, is to overcome that fear, and that's going to come about through communication, through educating workers what's the benefit of the changes that are being talked about or that are being implemented, and what's the benefit to you as a worker, and what's the benefit to the organisation as a whole.